For the video discussion for our class, I wanted to talk about the paper topic of mine that I had the strongest opinions on, and of the youth, college, and professional sports. The one I had the strongest opinion was youth sports. My topic was whether or not children under the age of 14 should be playing tackle football. There's arguments on both sides. The pros usually are more social cue based. Will my children still get uh, to participate in sports at important developmental stages of a child's life socially? Some parents are worried that other parents will judge them for not allowing their kids to play. Whereas the cons are more scientific based, based on head injuries and research and whether or not there are responsible adults on hand, whether it be coaches or training staff, that can accurately identify injuries and brain injuries. I definitely agree with the latter. I don't think youth sports or youth football should be played for kids under the age of 14. Um, there's one stat that in my research that immediately jumped out at me, and that was from 2014 to 16, 17 children died as a direct result of a head-related football injury, and I just think that's pretty ridiculous. If one or two NFL players were to die this season, football would be shut down. There'd be a complete overhaul, and everybody would be wanting to get to the bottom of the issue. So I'm not sure why in youth sports, I have to go digging through research to find that kind of thing out. It should be something that is widely recognized as being dangerous, or at least is not being regulated as well as it should be. The terms "get your bell rung" or a stinger, I think those should get thrown out the window and just be replaced with a brain injury. They don't have to be serious. They don't have to be a concussion necessarily, but hits to the brain where a kid gets up and says, "Ooh, I'm a little woozy." That's not a laughing matter anymore. That's pretty serious. On the surface, a big piece of the research was it doesn't look like hits are as serious for kids that age. They're not as big. They're not running as fast. They're not hitting as hard. But they are. The results, Sanford Sports Science Institute, they ran a study testing 11 and 13-year-old youth football players. They were going to originally test for the long-term effects, but as part of a sub-note in their research, but still an important one, they found that the magnitude of the hits that are being sustained by children that age are very similar in comparison with high school and with college players. So even though it doesn't look like youth football hits are very big, kids they're not moving as fast when they run into one another. The impact on the head and the magnitude of those hits, they register about the same. So regardless of all the other factors, football is still football, regardless of if the players are under 100 pounds or if they're 250 to 300 pounds. Those are still some very serious hits. Dr. Robert Stein, he was a big focal point of my research. He works at Boston University's CTE laboratory. He says children under the age of 12 should not play football, and I know the topic for my paper focused on children under the age of 14, but I still thought his research on under the age of 12 was very important. He says children that play football at that age more likely to experience depression symptoms, uncontrollable behavior, dysregulation later on in life. He found that by just testing adults, some that had played football, some that had played youth football, and some that had not. He purposely excluded participants from that study that had documented concussions when they were young, because he wanted to exclude the whole documented and actually diagnosed with a concussion argument out. So it's determined that even if a child at that age doesn't sustain a concussive blow, they're more likely to experience neurological issues later on in life, like I mentioned, with depression and with other behavioral issues, regardless of if they have a concussion or if they don't. At age 12, according to Stein, that's where he says it's really dangerous because a child's brain is still developing big time between the ages of 10 and 12, typically. So even smaller, as he says, subcussive blows to the head can lead to diminished mental capacity when someone is older. He tested that by testing former NFL players, retired NFL players, some that had played youth football, and some that had not. He was able to determine that regardless of the number of seasons a child plays after their after they're 12 years old, after they sustain those hits, it doesn't matter. The damage is done. A child can be done after the age of 13 or play until they're 35 in the NFL, the hits on the brain when it's still developing at the age of 12 is what really causes a lot of issues. And I think that's important for people to note, that it's not just about how long you play football, and that's usually a focal point of a lot of arguments as well. Well, if you play, 15 seasons of tackle football, yeah, this is going to happen. But any number of hits in any number of seasons in a child that plays football before the age of 12, before their brain is fully developed, there's some serious long-term effects that go along with that. And finally, Stern's final argument is that helmets almost do more damage than good, which seems strange to think about, but he refers to kids at young ages as bobbleheads when you get a helmet thrown on them, and they already don't quite have the neurological function of their bodies down yet, but they're being asked to go run and hit each other with their heads. And if you ever watch youth football, they're falling one way or the other because the helmet weighs them down. And according to sports engineering, they think that the size of the helmet should be determined more on body mass and not on head mass, because youth sports, or in youth in general, the size of the head is usually much larger than the size of the body in proportion, whereas with adults they're much more proportional the way it should be. So when a child's developing, having a heavy helmet placed on their head weighs on the neck particularly, and it leads to more rotational and angular injuries when they're playing football, when they're running into each other and their heads are already falling one way or the other and being weighed down by a heavy helmet. I think that's another big issue that not many people think about, that if you throw a helmet on the kid, they're going to be safer. Actually, in many cases, it makes it more dangerous for children if they have heavy helmets that, yes, they fit tightly around the head, but they're weighing on the neck, and they're going to cause more issues where just changing direction as a kid is sometimes difficult, let alone when there's extra momentum of a 2 or 3 pound helmet weighing down on the head and on the neck. Again, like I mentioned, there's arguments that go the other way. That a lot of parents think, well, my child has to play football or else they won't develop socially. They won't interact with kids in other ways. Parents are worried that if I don't let my son or daughter play football, then the other parents will judge me, or they'll think whatever about me for that I'm not a fair parent, or what have you. I think those arguments are pretty weak personally, but they've been shown to be effective in the past. Now, studies show that concussions and brain injuries are actually the number one factor that parents consider when choosing whether or not to let their child play football. So I definitely think that's a step in the right direction. It shouldn't matter about peer pressure or social change, or social issues, excuse me. It should matter more about the safety of individuals throughout their entire lives. So I definitely think that that's a move in the right direction. From 2008 to 2016, a 2.5% decrease in high school participation. That's 28,000 high school participants. That's linked directly to kids not playing tackle football as youths. And I think that's not that I'm against football. I love football, high school, college, and professional, but keeping kids away from tackle football at such a young age, there's clearly evidence, I think, that I've presented that through my research, that it's linked to issues down the road, and I think it can be eliminated. I think a lot of those social benefits that parents point to of interaction for children in developing, they can be taught through basketball, baseball, soccer, any number of sport, including flag football, where kids can learn the basics of the game: running, catching, blocking, throwing, and basic schemes, and they can do all that without having to hit their heads against one another while their brains are still developing. To tie this everything back into our class, we as SRM professionals, if we work in recreation, I think we need to be informed, or if we work as athletic directors at middle schools and high schools, regardless, we need to be informed about brain injuries, how to prevent them, and what kind of personnel need to be on hand, whether coaches are certified, whether there needs to be medical staff on hand. I think those are very big issues that that they need to be addressed, and we as professionals, we're the future in this business, and we need to know about these kinds of things, because I think football is still going to be around for a long time. It might change and it might differentiate, but it needs to change, and we need to be informed on these issues.